After many years filled with challenges, victories, and divine encounters, Abram began living a quieter and more reflective life. He no longer needed to fight in battles, as he had when rescuing his nephew Lot from invading kings. Genesis 14. His relationship with God remained strong, but instead of heroic deeds, his focus turned toward the concerns of family and inheritance. Despite his wealth and status, Abram had no children to pass on his legacy. This troubled him deeply. As he pondered the future, God spoke to him in what became a defining moment in his life. God's promise to Abram. Genesis 15 verses 1-4 NIV recounts this event. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. God then took Abram outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Genesis 15 verse 5 NIV. This divine promise was profound. God assured Abram that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Despite Abram's advanced age, he was in his 80s at the time, he believed God's promise. Sarai's desperation. Abram's wife, Sarai, also longed for a child. However, she was well past the age of childbearing and felt the weight of her inability to conceive. Frustration and disappointment filled her heart. Genesis 16 verses 1-2 NIV states, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Sarai's words reveal her anguish and perhaps a hint of bitterness toward God. Her inability to conceive was a source of deep sorrow, and she blamed God for her predicament. Out of desperation, she proposed a solution that was culturally acceptable at the time, but fraught with complications. She offered her servant Hagar to Abram. Hagar's role. Hagar, an Egyptian slave likely acquired during Abram and Sarai's time in Egypt, Genesis 12 verses 10-20, had no choice but to obey her mistress. She became pregnant with Abram's child. Genesis 16 verse 4 NIV tells us, He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Hagar's pregnancy changed the dynamics in the household. Carrying Abram's child elevated her status, and tensions between her and Sarai grew. Sarai, who had hoped this arrangement would bring her joy, now felt even more miserable. Sarai's anger. Sarai's frustration boiled over, and she blamed Abram for the situation. Genesis 16 verse 5 NIV captures her outburst. Then Sarai said to Abram, You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Abram, trying to maintain peace, told Sarai to handle the matter as she saw fit. Genesis 16 verse 6 NIV records his response. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Hagar's encounter with the angel. Hagar fled into the desert, seeking escape from Sarai's harsh treatment. There, she encountered an angel of the Lord near a spring. Genesis 16 verses 7 to 9 NIV describes the encounter. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel also gave Hagar a remarkable promise. "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." Genesis 16 verse 10 NIV. The angel instructed Hagar to name her son Ishmael, meaning God hears, because God had heard her misery. Hagar's return. Humbled and reassured by the angel's words, Hagar returned to Sarai and gave birth to Abram's son, Ishmael. Genesis 16 verses 15 to 16 NIV states, "So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael, the birth of Isaac." Years later, God fulfilled his promise to Abram and Sarai. At the age of 90, Sarai, now called Sarah, miraculously gave birth to Isaac, as recorded in Genesis 21 verses 1 to 3 NIV. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. This joyous occasion should have brought peace to the household, but tensions remained. Sarah's jealousy. Genesis 21 verses 9 to 10 NIV describes Sarah's reaction when she saw Ishmael. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking, and she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Sarah's jealousy and resentment had not faded. Despite Ishmael being Abraham's son, Sarah viewed him as a threat to Isaac's inheritance. God's instruction to Abraham. Abraham was distressed by Sarah's demand, but God reassured him. Genesis 21 verses 12 to 13 NIV states, "But God said to him, 'Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring.'" Hagar and Ishmael's departure. Abraham provided Hagar and Ishmael with food and water and sent them away. Genesis 21 verse 14 NIV recounts, "Early the next morning Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When their provisions ran out, Hagar despaired, but God intervened once again. Genesis 21 verses 17 to 19 NIV tells us, God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. The legacy of Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael grew up to become the father of a great nation, fulfilling God's promise to Hagar. Genesis 21 verses 20 to 21 NIV states, God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Meanwhile, Isaac became the child of promise, through whom God's covenant with Abraham was fulfilled.
If you found this video enjoyable, please consider liking and sharing it. Additionally, subscribing to this channel will ensure that you receive more updates in the future. Thank you.